I would like to welcome you all to our next and last session of today. It's on aligning development cooperation with sovereign financing priorities to achieve the SDGs. So I would like to invite first distinguished panelists to the stage. We have the pleasure of having Ambassador Ernesto Soberan Guzman, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Cuba to the United Nations. Connecting online, we have Mr. Nanayao Yanka, who is the principal economist from the Ministry of Finance of Ghana. I hope he can hear us well.
Yes, I can. I hope you can hear me too.
To the stage, please, Mr. Luca de Freire. He's the Deputy Secretary General from ActionAid Italia. Mr. Olivier Cataneo, Head of the Policy Analysis and Strategy Unit from the OECD's Development Assistance Committee. Mrs. Blanca Yanes, who is the head of the Department for Multilateral Cooperation of IACIT. And last but not least, Mr. Anderson Caputo Silva from IDB. He's the Division Chief of Connectivity, Markets, and Finance from the Inter-American Development Bank. So sovereign financing has a critical role in funding national sustainable development priorities and essential investments, including investments in infrastructure, education, healthcare, and climate resilience, among others. However, as we heard in today's earlier sessions, many countries face constrained fiscal space and challenges posed by rising debt levels as well as high debt service levels. And as countries navigate an increasingly complex financing landscape that calls for mobilizing private resources, integrating innovative financing mechanisms and approaches, and strengthening governance, their needs for technical assistance and capacity building are also evolving. And in this context, we also see important gaps and challenges in aligning development cooperation with national priorities, with fragmentation and misaligned support often limiting progress. So in this session, our panel will explore country experiences, discuss technical capacity needs, and identify actionable solutions and commitments to enhance alignment and effectiveness in development finance. So without further ado, let me turn to Ambassador Ernesto Soberan Guzman. Ambassador, as Cuba continues to implement its national development priorities, what types of technical assistance are most needed to navigate the complex financial landscape? Additionally, how can international development partners better align their programs with Cuba's priorities to ensure effective and sustainable development cooperation? Over to you.
Thank you, Nergy, and good afternoon, everyone. Taking in account that it's late, this is the last panel. Later we have a reception, and we still have a translation service. Please allow me to make my statement in Spanish, okay? So thank you very much. Primeramente agradezco al PNUD y al resto de las contrapartes que han organizado este evento y de invitarnos a participar y compartir entre todos nuestras experiencias con los marcos nacionales de financiación integradas. Igualmente agradecemos la oportunidad de participar en este panel para reflexionar sobre un tema de gran importancia, no solo para el futuro de los países en desarrollo, sino especialmente para Cuba, que se enfrenta a desafíos únicos en su camino hacia el desarrollo sostenible. Entonces, respondiendo a las preguntas que me hacías, en primer lugar, existe un compromiso nacional en Cuba con los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, pues, por parte no solo de Cuba, sino de los países en desarrollo también. Sin embargo, consideramos que ha sido insuficiente el apoyo internacional para dar seguimiento a los compromisos asumidos en la agenda de acción de Addis Abeba y la Agenda 2030, incluso antes de la pandemia de la COVID-19. Como se ha señalado con los paneles anteriores, cuando aún faltan 5 años o faltando solo 5 años para el 2030, menos de una quinta parte de los ODS van por buen camino, situación que se ve agravada por el déficit anual de financiación que ya se ha comentado ampliamente. Para Cuba, el cumplimiento de la Agenda 2030 constituye un compromiso de Estado y una prioridad nacional. Ello se sustenta en la alineación de sus 17 ODS con los 6 ejes estratégicos de nuestro Plan Nacional para Desarrollo Económico y Social hasta el 2030. El Plan de la Economía y el presupuesto anual no son instrumentos mediante los cuales se identifican y definen los recursos y capacidades para la implementación, son instrumentos mediante los cuales se identifican y definen los recursos y capacidades para la implementación de los ODS. Y hoy en la mañana uno de los panelistas señalaba la importancia de que hubiese este tipo de coordinación y de trabajo conjunto. Aún en el complejo contexto inflacionario que caracteriza el escenario internacional, Cuba es uno de los países de la región latinoamericana que más invierte en asistencia y seguridad social, salud, educación, cultura y deporte, con más del 60% del gasto público destinado a estas esferas. No obstante, las limitaciones derivadas del bloqueo económico, comercial y financiero impuesto por el gobierno de los Estados Unidos por más de 6 décadas constituyen el principal impedimento para el desarrollo de nuestro país y hace que el panorama financiero nacional sea inestable, no diversificado y poco sostenible. Es cada vez más evidente la negativa de cientos de entidades alrededor del mundo a ofrecer créditos externos al país, así como a mantener relaciones bancarios-financieras y comerciales por temor a represalias. Las medidas coercitivas unilaterales continúan siendo un obstáculo innegable que limita notablemente los marcos financieros nacionales integrados para el logro de los ODS. Y nos place mucho que el borrador cero del documento que se hizo público recientemente incluya también dentro de las menciones el tema del impacto que tienen las medidas coercitivas unilaterales en materia de desarrollo. Ahora, bajo el liderazgo de las autoridades nacionales, el sistema de Naciones Unidas también ha contribuido al avance de los ODS y de nuestro Plan Nacional para Desarrollo Económico y Social hasta el 2030, con la provisión de medios de implementación, tanto a nivel nacional como local, de una manera articulada a las prioridades acordadas en el marco de cooperación para el desarrollo sostenible. El programa Apoyo a la conformación del Marco Nacional Integrado de Financiamiento para los ODS en Cuba, CIFRA por sus siglas en inglés, es parte de las iniciativas financiadas por el Fondo Conjunto ODS del Sistema de las Naciones Unidas. Como parte de este concepto, CIFRA se propuso evaluar y repensar las estrategias de políticas dirigidas a incrementar, diversificar y optimizar las fuentes de financiamiento al desarrollo en Cuba. Durante 33 meses, julio 2020, marzo 2023, CIFRA llevó a cabo un amplio programa de ejercicios de diagnósticos y recomendaciones sobre las políticas de financiamiento al desarrollo en el país. Esto permitió identificar que se necesita trabajar en áreas como la captación y diversificación de recursos externos para el desarrollo de infraestructura, explorar las oportunidades de acceso a bancos regionales y subregionales de desarrollo, la gestión de la deuda externa, la capacitación en mecanismos innovadores de financiamiento, en una estrategia de financiamiento para la transformación productiva e inserción internacional y en la utilización de la ciencia, la tecnología y la innovación para modernizar y optimizar los procesos productivos. Estos son ámbitos que se beneficiarán de la asistencia técnica a nivel internacional y por parte de las entidades del Sistema de Naciones Unidas. En mayo del 2024, el Ministerio de Economía y Planificación, el Banco Central de Cuba y el PNUD, con el auspicio del Banco Centroamericano de Integración Económica, organizaron la Conferencia Internacional sobre Financiamiento para el Desarrollo en La Habana. Durante 2 días, más de 150 delegados nacionales e internacionales debatieron soluciones alternativas y generaron alianzas en torno a los desafíos de Cuba para financiar su desarrollo. Este espacio, como continuidad de CIFRA, permitió identificar áreas de trabajo para enfrentar los particulares desafíos del país en el financiamiento al desarrollo y contribuyó a la formación de capacidades. Este tipo de iniciativa contribuye a que los socios internacionales para el desarrollo alineen mejor sus programas con las prioridades de Cuba y aseguren una cooperación al desarrollo eficaz y sostenible, pues permite conocer en profundidad los desafíos que enfrenta el país. Del mismo modo, los socios internacionales deben conocer y familiarizarse con el Plan Nacional para el Desarrollo Económico y Social hasta el 2030, donde se identifican las prioridades nacionales de desarrollo. El proyecto Cifra con el PNUD también constituye una referencia para identificar las necesidades en materia de financiación. Igualmente, se deben desarrollar proyectos que promuevan la sostenibilidad a largo plazo, asegurando que las inversiones no solo resuelven problemas inmediatos, sino que también creen las bases para un desarrollo económico y social sostenible. Es importante asegurar que los programas de cooperación incluyan componentes de resiliencia climática, como el impulso de energías renovables, la adaptación al cambio climático y la gestión de desastres naturales, áreas en las que Cuba tiene experiencia y también necesita apoyo internacional. Adicionalmente, se debe garantizar que la financiación en condiciones favorables se proporciona allí donde más se necesita, teniendo en cuenta medidas que vayan más allá del PIB para fundamentar el acceso de los países en desarrollo a la misma y a la cooperación técnica. En conclusión, para que los socios internacionales sean realmente eficaces en su esfuerzo de cooperación con nuestro país, deben adoptar un enfoque basado en el respeto a la soberanía, la concreción de soluciones y la adaptación a las realidades nacionales. La clave es asegurar que la cooperación se alinee con las prioridades nacionales de Cuba y que promueva el desarrollo sostenible a largo plazo. De este modo, Cuba podrá continuar avanzando en sus objetivos de desarrollo y alcanzar un futuro más próspero y sostenible. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Embajador. Thank you so much for emphasizing your national commitment and how development cooperation can have a complementary role to support the implementation of your INFF CIFRA, as you call in Spanish. So with that, I would like to pass to our next panelist, Mr. Nanayao Yanka from Ghana. I would like to check if we have the connection. Mr. Yanka.
Hello?
Okay, perfect. We see
Yes,
on the
hello. Can you hear me?
over to you, please. So can we check if we have the voice connection as well? Good afternoon.
Hello? Good evening.
Okay, perfect. We hear you. So, Mr. Yanka, I would like to ask, as Ghana continues to implement its integrated national financing framework, what are the most critical areas where support is needed to enhance its effectiveness? And how can development partners best align their assistance to address these needs and contribute to financing Ghana's sustainable development goals? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good evening to everyone. I think that for Ghana, the INFF process began as part of our commitment to align financing with sustainable development goals and our national development agenda as well. So for over the period, the process has involved assessing the financing needs, identifying and managing the system resource effectively. Over the period, we've achieved certain key milestones. For the pilot assemblies that we're working with, we've been able to strengthen their resource mobilization mechanisms. We're also supporting the pilot assemblies in terms of the financing strategies that they identified as part of that process. We are supporting them this year to put in place the structures that will actually do that. Now, on the critical question of the support that we need, I think that institutional capacity has been mentioned, and so I'll not belabor that point. But of course, Ghana needs institutional capacity to strengthen the skills and the personnel needed for this process. A critical area, for example, where we need support would be frameworks to enable private sector participation. The INFF abroad, private sector participation is critical, not just implementation of the INFF, but also the implementation of national development plans. Unfortunately, for most countries, including Ghana, there isn't a clear policy framework or regulatory framework that allows private sector participation. So for us, one of the things that we need support in is to have this framework in place. Already, we are seeking to implement the Green Finance Taxonomy. The Green Finance Taxonomy Guide will provide the private sector the needed incentive to work towards green and sustainable projects. We have the PPP, private partners, private and public private partnerships that are already in existence. Going forward, we will need support in ensuring that PPPs are tailored towards priority sectors, including education and health. Again, one other critical area that we might need support, while we're doing the INFF process, one of the critical areas that came up was a number of subnational level agencies, projects or programs. However, these projects or programs were not bankable, i.e. they could not find proper investors because they had not gotten to the stage where these programs could be bankable. So I think that for us, one of the key areas that we'll be looking at will be looking at thinker capacity at the national, subnational levels to be able to identify, design, and prepare commercially viable projects, especially in the priority areas such as renewable energy and infrastructure. Again, we might want to look at strengthening monitoring evaluation mechanisms. Establishing robust monitoring and evaluation mechanisms is essential for tracking the progress toward achieving the SDGs through the INFFs. There's a lot of monitoring tools available, and we are hoping that we'll have the support to be able to use some of these monitoring tools. We're also looking at enhancing domestic resource mobilization, and the conversation that's taking place there. Resource mobilization is a key factor, it's a key enabler in implementing the INFFs. And so as we look to expand our tax base and improve compliance, we are hoping that our partners can support in the adoption of modern technologies to ensure that resources are collected efficiently. In terms of aligning your partner assistance, I think that one critical factor stands out: harmonize. One of the critical pillars of aid effectiveness was harmonization, and it still comes to play. So we would expect for partners to be able to align, it will be expected that they'll be able to harmonize their programs to avoid fragmentation. This will allow the Ministry of Finance to properly coordinate all of these projects and programs that are ongoing. We're also looking at catalytic investments. Of course, Ghana's approach to SDG financing is multifaceted. Our strategy has focused on innovation financing mechanisms, on collaboration with international partners, and prioritizing critical sectors. We would hope that different partners would support this process. And once you're able to provide us, once you're able to harmonize these mechanisms, I'm sure that Ghana will be in a position to implement its INFF and its national development programs. Another critical area is data-driven decision making. Data is critical for just not the implementation of the INFF, but the SDGs and the national development plans. And so we're providing technical support to enhance Ghana's data collection, monitoring accountability systems, would ensure the transparency and we'll be able to critically measure the impact. I'll end by saying that we're open to new partnerships and support as we continue our INFF process. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having shared some critical areas where support is needed, including capacity building support at subnational level for project designs in critical sectors, monitoring and evaluation mechanisms, and data collection systems, as well as domestic resource mobilization. So we have heard from two country representatives about their country experiences, and now I would like to perhaps recall the word integrated in the INFFs. So that integration also calls for integration and coordination with different actors and having inclusive dialogues for the design of financing strategies and financing reform. So the civil society in that sense also has a critical role and contributions. I would like to ask Luca the next question. So development financing often fails to prioritize inclusivity and people-centered approaches, which are critical for achieving sustainable development. From a civil society perspective, can you elaborate a bit on how organizations like ActionAid can ensure that development cooperation and sovereign financing strategies are accountable, coherent, and inclusive? How can civil society organizations work with governments and development partners to ensure development support reaches the most vulnerable communities and reflect local needs?
Thank you. Let me see how this is working. Is it working? Yes, thank you so much, Madam Chair. This is a very, very challenging question, and I have a short answer. Actually, by itself cannot do that by definition. It's a tremendous job to comply with the expectations that you outline, and this is something that only working together within other CSOs, the broad communities in countries and other stakeholders we can at least consider achieving. But let me start with thanks. I think thanks are in order for the organizers, for you, and for the speakers, because it has been very rich, full discussion, and I have learned a lot from different quarters, and surely I can leave the room this evening and tomorrow, I guess, with a better understanding of what we're doing when we talk about integrated national financing framework. And I'm going to be responding to your question, obviously, but I would like to start with some basic points to share with you that the CSO community got involved in the INFF discussions very soon when this project was kind of revamped in 2019. You may remember with the report, the thematic section of the report in 2019 was really dedicated to integrated national financing framework. But even before that, because the CSO community was very involved in the discussions leading to the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, and INFFs is one of those elements coming, as we have discussed earlier today, coming from that process. And I always love to refer to Chapter 9 of Addis Ababa Action Agenda, because it's a fundamental chapter where fundamental principles such as country leadership, national plans, and financial national plans are outlined. So we started from that. And let me note in passing that when reading the zero draft for the outcome document, there are good elements, let me say, that I have not negotiated this with my other CSO fellows. This is just my feedback. Sections 6 to 9 of the current zero draft, again, are including important references to the effectiveness agenda and country leadership. So we started a few years back, and as we understood that there was a potential to implement the effectiveness principles, the notion of country leadership beyond the traditional domain of international development cooperation. There is the chance through the INFFs to implement, to apply the notion of country ownership to finance issues in general. And so with that concern in mind, with that understanding in mind, we start to engage it, and we monitor how the discussion on INFFs was evolving throughout the years. So we developed two major areas of concerns, and from these areas of concerns, our role can kind of stem from. The first area of concern was really about what I've just said. Are the INFFs creating additional space for ownership? Yes or no? This was one of the fundamental questions from the rules of the game as described in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. We had to assume, yes, we have this opportunity, but we were very keen to monitor how the discussion was evolving and the extent to which those premises would be confirmed. And you may well familiar with effectiveness agenda. An effectiveness agenda is not just about governments, at least since Busan, or rather since the Accra agenda of 2008, when the international community officially recognized CSOs as development actors in their own right. Obviously, we knew that, but it was important to get the official recognition in 2008. So the effectiveness agenda comes with this multi-stakeholder feature. And by the way, there is a platform, the GPDC, that is a fair representation of this multi-stakeholder nature. And by the way, you know that there is a fourth monitoring round underway under the GPDC auspices, and I would like you to participate in this GPDC monitoring exercise because it is closely interrelated with what we're doing today. And let me know that today we heard other references to other important matters, such as metrics, TOSD, ODA, noting in passing that ODA is not by definition SDGs compliant. TOSD is, ODA is not. So there's a number of interesting things that have come up today. So the first concern was about the effectiveness and involvement of different stakeholders. And the second concern is really about the substance of the reforms that we have talked about a lot today. When it comes to reforms and the nature of these reforms, we're still going about the issue is who is on the driving seat. And that's the way I'm going to frame that. Because our concerns from the start was who's going to actually draft the reforms, who's going to be leading on these reforms. And all these discussions on technical assistance are very relevant to this specific issue. So these were the two concerns from the start, and from these two concerns we start looking into how these INFFs were evolving. We must say that some of the concerns we had from the start might have been addressed to a significant extent. We noticed from the beginning that was the risk of INFFs becoming the silver bullet, responding to any development concerns. But then we noticed that from a framework, rightly enough, INFFs evolved into an approach which actually leave more space for countries to lead. So we noticed that there was a fine-tuning, I would say, from outside, there was a fine-tuning that was very much needed. So to cut a long story short, when it comes to a conversation like this, which is highly political, the role of CSOs is fundamentally the role of the advocates. We cannot be implementers in this space because we are not implementing, I don't know, regulations when it comes to state. So the state regulations. So we have been advocate, and we have been playing an advocate role mostly. That's something I would like to acknowledge with you, mostly at the global level. And we had very tremendous conversations, very fruitful conversation with the UN team working on this matter. When it comes to the local level, this is something I really want to further discuss. The CSO community is large. It is impossible to represent the NGO community. We heard today from Senegal, I think was a colleague working on tax matters, so there's a plurality of actors. But I know that, and this was one of the things we discussed in the past, is the intention of an INFF facility to look into the extent to which CSOs have been involved. Data is already available to some extent in the Staking Talk report, but the point was the quality of this participation. For instance, whether or not messages, proposals coming from CSOs have been taken into consideration. Noting that we have the same kind of situation when we are monitoring the effectiveness agenda, something I've just briefly mentioned too. Lastly, it is not possible to have this conversation from my hand not to note that we are facing challenges that have been extensively referred to this morning. And I taking the responsibility of saying we are going into a new conservative era that can be very dangerous in terms of CSO space. The shrink in CSO space is a real thing happening. We notice that surely it worsened throughout the COVID season with social restrictions, but this is happening. And so we could not talk about productive CISO's involvement and these processes at local level when we have such shrinking space challenges to face. Hopefully, FFD4 can be a space where this issue can be brought back up, and we're going to work in that direction. We would like to count on your support and making sure that these concerns are properly pictured in the final document. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luca, for having stressed the fundamental advocacy role of civil society organizations, as well as the role in monitoring effectiveness. And of course, there's room for strengthening this, especially at local and national level. And thanks also for sharing ideas for FFD4. So now I would like to move on to 3 development partners. First, Olivier from OECD. Olivier, as countries increasingly adopt financing frameworks like INFFs, what role do you see for international organizations in providing support and facilitating knowledge exchange to accelerate progress? And how can international organizations better broker the supply and demand sides of technical assistance to ensure countries access the support they need for their financing strategies, and what role could INFFs play as a platform to coordinate such efforts effectively? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. 3 questions in one, so I will pick quickly on the points you made, which I think the first one will be the paradigm shift that is needed for the donor. Second one, technical assistance and capacity building, how to bring it up to scale. And third, what are the challenges with aligning ODA with those new country strategies? The first one on the paradigm shift. I think it's very interesting in the zero draft of the Seville outcome document that one of the key messages is to put the developing countries in the driver's seat for financing strategies, as has already been mentioned this morning, and also, as was just mentioned, to revitalize the effectiveness agenda. And I think the INFF tick lots of boxes in that perspective. Obviously, it helps country ownership. But it also helps alignment and coordination of the donors. It helps potentially also for results and impact measurement and for the mutual accountability. But as was just mentioned by Luca, the effectiveness agenda is already old. I mean, 20 years of this agenda.
Since Paris.
Exactly, since Paris, and still a long way to go. You saw the news yesterday with the president of the US suspending the aid for 3 months, and his argument was that it was not aligned with the US interests. So I think UNDESA could give him an alignment 101 course to see what the alignment actually should be the other way around. But beyond this, I mean, this I think it's still very important in today's geopolitical context to take into consideration this kind of remarks. And we see it also with the European Union that more and more the donors are moving towards a win-win strategy. And this is to convince their own constituencies because there is a trade-off potentially in their own budget between international development cooperation and other public policies. So in this context, when it's obvious for the US or the EU what their win is, I think the INFF are super important in determining what's also the win for the partner countries. And also, I would add a third win to that, which will be the people and planet also, that should also benefit from those new partnerships. So the paradigm shift is quite important, that the alignment with the country strategies through the INFF. It means also, for instance, for ODA and the definition of ODA, to look beyond the donor perspective to have also the recipient perspective, and that's what we are trying to do with the TOSD, to look beyond ODA at other flows and have the recipient perspective. And third part of this paradigm shift is also to move probably to go from effectiveness to what I call fitness, which, because effectiveness is also very much a donor perspective, how much you get in with your dollar spent on IDC, but the fitness is in a competitive world where different actors compete to provide, including private, to provide the funding for the partner countries, who is the best partner, what's the best instrument, and the best fit for the strategies that is defined through the INFF. On technical assistance and capacity building, it has been said already, it's easy to say that we put partner countries in the driver's seat. I mean, if they don't have the capacities to do so, and also we create expectations with the INFF, and they need to deliver something, and we need to support the countries in the implementation and give them access, as was mentioned, for instance, in the previous panel, on all those innovative instruments that are now available, because innovation can also create inequalities if not everyone has access to the technical knowledge and capacities to deploy them. So what we have been discussing today at the DAC during the lunch break, we were connected remotely, is how to respond to this increasing need for technical assistance and capacity building through the INFF facility. And we are thinking of establishing a platform where the need identified through the INFF facility by UNDP could be posted, and we'll have the bilateral and others be aware of those needs and have the capacity to respond to them. Let's take the example again of the previous panel. If Benin wants to do a green bond, it can post the demand, and Luxembourg said, oh, we have the capacity, and they can respond to it. Because at the moment it's very much ad hoc, and there are still some gaps. Sometimes there are also duplications, and I think the market could work much better that way. And we'll try to deliver this idea by FFD4. Last point is on a very challenging issue on aligning ODA with those new strategies. And that also the Seville Zero draft touches upon this question, and I think it will be debated in the coming months. With more technical questions like country programmable aid or budget support, which if you are a country and do a long-term strategy, you expect also the financing to be predictable and longer term. And this is something to be discussed. There is a question in the Zero draft about whether we should set new targets, new measurements and definitions. And I think we welcome the call also on the DAC to explore that. We welcome this call. I think after 10 years of modernization of ODA, it's a bit time to reflect and wonder whether it hasn't become too complex. For instance, many people don't understand the in-donor refugee costs, why it's in there, and so on. PSI. And so I think PSI extremely complex. So I think it's a good call from Seville to re-explore all that, and to be clear, it will not be an easy task because, of course, we all like budget support and CPA and so on, but also we need to keep some flexibility and some agility for aid to respond to crisis, as we have seen for the COVID, or we see with any humanitarian crisis. So setting objective at the sub-level can also be to the detriment of this capacity to respond. And the last point to make, that also 50% of ODA now is channeled through the multilateral system, which means that if we rethink the effectiveness and so on, we need to make sure that all the ODA that is channeled through the multilateral system, we also include in the effectiveness principles and disciplines the multilateral organization and the MDBs and so on. I will leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olivier, for emphasizing that the INFFs determine the win side from the recipient country for win-win and triple win scenarios, and also ideas for strengthening how to match demand and supply side of technical assistance via the INFF facility, and the ideas also for unpacking the definition of ODA, perhaps in FFT4. So I would like to turn now to Blanca from IEC. Blanca, ensuring that countries remain in the driver's seat is essential for aligning development cooperation with national priorities and maximizing impact. So how does IEC align its support with financing and technical capacity needs at the country level? And can country-led INFFs be a basis for enhanced alignment?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. We are at the end of a very long day, very interesting, with a lot of information, so I will try to be very brief. It is a pleasure for us, for the Spanish cooperation, to be at this table where we have a diversity of visions and perspectives. From the Spanish agency, ownership, it's at the very core of how we work. On one side, we have it on the principles from the Master Plan for Cooperation, when it says that ownership, it not only has a crucial importance for maximizing impact, but also sets the basis for sustainability. So also, when we go to country basis or to partner countries, we start with, the basis for promoting ownership start with the dialogue from the country. And in that, we try to include a variety of actors. Of course, we have the government part, but also from our perspective, it's very relevant to include both CSOs and other relevant actors. And as we were mentioning along the day, private sector, it's important that they are at the table from the very beginning. This sets the basis for what we call partnership, association partnership. And from that, obviously, for most donors, the starting point is the national strategy. And in that sense, INFFs really can play a really crucial role when you integrate them in the planning that most countries have been doing in the last 20 years, but not always integrating what needs to be done, also including budgeting and also including priorities. I think that along the day we've been seeing how we need to do more. There is an increasing number of actors. It's pretty crowded arena, and many times fragmentation, this ends up in fragmentation, and I think we need to advance in having a common language. And we consider that INFFs can help us retune and help us talk the same language again. That's why for us, INFFs really means it could be a good opportunity if we are able to advance in their implementation to have a really enhanced alignment. I would like just, for example, how has changed our approach, for example, in a recent program that we are supporting through UNDP, and it's focused on climate change and NDCs. And not only they are, giving us the framework of what they are going to do, is how they are integrating it with the INFFs, and how they are including all the elements related with financing in every activity that we are doing. Finally, I would just like also to recall that as a holistic agency, as we are also, we could not work in this facility as a partnership, only supporting it directly, but also we are here as a partner facilitating technical assistance, and also, as it was mentioned in the previous session, through access to finance. So we are putting all the different modalities of cooperation in order to support the advance towards the Agenda of 2030. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Blanca, for your very clear insights, mentioning that always the national strategies should be the starting point, and this way INFFs give you the chance of speaking the same language, and those national strategies also include not only the development strategies, but also climate strategies, NDCs, etc. And increasingly we are working on that integration. With that, I would like now to turn to Anderson from IDP. Anderson, given IDP's focus on sustainable economic growth and financial integration, can you tell us how IDP can further support countries to align sovereign financing strategies with their development priorities through the INFFs? And what role do you see for multilateral development banks in enhancing coordination, reducing fragmentation, leveraging financing, and providing technical assistance to strengthen development cooperation efforts? Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's on already. Oh, great. No, thank you. So after a long day and then being last in the panel, like the good news is that my intervention is very aligned to what my colleagues just presented now, and I'll be more specific in terms of the IDB because of the question, but also bring in the end an idea here because we are trying to, what's next and where I think it's a very promising route, no? That where we can tick several of the boxes, no? But first, like talking about the IDB, it's very important to provide the context that we are living in the IDB, no? Under the President Ilan Goldfein that he joined a bit over 2 years ago, we worked, like one of his first speeches is that he said, like, we need to stop like looking at only at the numbers, at volumes of lending, but we need to put development effectiveness at the center, no? And then based on that vision, we developed like extensively, like with consultations, et cetera, and approved an institutional strategy in the IDB, and at the core is impact. No? The strategy actually calls like IDB Impact Plus. No? And that is driving a lot of changes in the way we process loans, lending, the dialogue with authorities. Like so country ownership is core at the center. The alignment now of sustainable development goals, the prioritization. So it's also another point that was mentioned here. It's not only about like development effectiveness in general, but on what you're actually doing. No? Like, so the prioritization that is so important with the scarcity we know we have in terms of capital, no? On public capital. And then so we think that with that we are really getting this alignment of country priorities with the dialogue, and also changing from the inside now and prioritizing development effectiveness. No? So there is a whole, like a really strong change on that, including creating some institutional changes inside of the IDB with a creation of areas more focused in quality and et cetera. No? So this is it's a very serious and strong line of change of work. So it's really walking the talk. It's not now. And then what was mentioned here also that I fully agree is the relevance then of having national financing strategies. No? And then as was mentioned by others, no? But it's super critical in terms of create institutional capacity in terms of regulations and rules, governance, like improving talent that is around. So it's capacity building, it's enabling environment. And it's through these national holistic strategies that are critical to ensure that countries then will be targeting, focusing on those things that really matter. And then also prioritizing and then attract investments, foster more resource mobilization in the end. So now is the part that I said that I had an example and what I think like looking forward. Now we are approaching like the next Finance for Development conference. We are all seeing like one of the things we stop and reflect is the fragmentation that was mentioned. No? There's so many actors like trying to do the good thing, no? That we are trying all together, and there are multiple initiatives taking place at the same time. So it's very critical for us to identify those like that we find already very good signals that are promising ways, and they're ticking several of the boxes that we talked here about. It is about financing, limited financing of public sector. It is about creating the conditions that this limited financing will facilitate much larger sums of money coming from private sector. And then it's about getting supporting the countries with strong country ownership on having those national strategies that gives that clarity, that investment will be going there, and where we can support through technical assistance and capacity building on those areas that I mentioned, that there's strong governance behind, no? That the frameworks, the principles, you can really trust on this. And the example that we have had, we're working closely recently with the government of Brazil on the Eco-Invest program. No? This is a program that is for private capital mobilization, and that addresses also FX risks on mobilizing capital and how can you address these risks. But it's more than that. It is really like, for example, through a loan that we're working, and then other institutions are, through a policy-based loan, to improve the enabling environment around, to create the governance around the program that is credible, to improve the enabling environment, even on the fiscal side, looking at the tax regulations and tax reforms, and then innovation that was mentioned here, putting innovation, as we tell, we work a lot in the it's not innovation in a vacuum. No? It needs to be innovation for impact, where you have all these other things. And then in innovation, we are working closely and already with very tangible early success that where we are putting together blending financing, we are putting hedging solutions from derivatives, but also liquidity facility, and also supporting with project development. So there are 4 different lines in this program that they all comprise this holistic approach, support also from the government of the UK with technical assistance. Now, and just as an example, there was a first blending financing auction that mobilized with 7 billion reais of now a bit more than $1 billion, mobilized a sum of 45 billion, now so over 6 times, with participation of 9 large banks, like you can put Citi, HSBC, Santander, very large banks that came with projects that they will mobilize capital for that are linked to the ecological transformation in Brazil. Okay, so I think that looking into this, how we, and I see a huge role here for the facility, the INFF facility, how we can team up together and replicate initiatives such as this one. I'm not saying that this is the one. I'm just saying that there are multiple initiatives out there, and we should be targeting some that are promising ones and focus on how we can scale them up. So I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anderson, for having emphasized the strong focus of IDB on effectiveness and impact of your lending, and how you see the potential of scaling up some initiatives or replicating with multiple actors in support of national priorities. So there is a lot of room for collaborating at a national level through the INFF processes. So now we have a little bit of time, about 10 minutes before our reception, in case we can have one round of questions from the participants. I see one colleague with the microphone, so perhaps we have one question. The panel would like to go to the reception. Yes, Carlos, yeah. Over to you.
Not sure if it's working. It's working.
It is.
Yeah. No, for the ambassador of Cuba, I work for UNDP with energy finance, and have been working with Cuba. It's a pleasure, an honor to work with Cuba. And recently, we had the opportunity to launch the Laboratory of Financial Innovation in Cuba of the Central Bank and the Ministry of Energy. It's more focused on energy transition. So it was inspired in somehow, Anderson, in the Laboratory of Financial Innovation led by IDB, CVM, and ABDE in Brazil. So for me, this is a very interesting tool, an instrument to promote financial innovation through pilots, regulatory and financial instruments, and also bringing maturity to the financial system. I had a question for Anderson, just a question, Anderson, on the Eco-Invest, because I think that's a really interesting tool that you are working, and I would also like to talk to you later, because I think that we can leverage this interesting support and technical assistance to try to leverage this in other countries, and also in Brazil, working, for example, with Sudan, and other entities, subnational entities. So thank you very much. Just a comment, a pleasure, and congratulations for the panel.
Any other questions or comments from the participants? Okay, so I think in our last panel, we heard it loud and clear that alignment between development cooperation and sovereign financing priorities is essential for achieving the SDGs, and in this context, the INFFs offer significant potential. So the insights from this session will inform not only our discussions tomorrow, but also our outcomes for the FFT4 preparation. So I would like to thank the panelists again and the participants. A round of applause, please.
Right, well, thank you, Nergis, and thank you to the panelists, and thank you to you all. It's been a long day, some very rich discussions. I think we may all be in need of a drink, and we have some reception for an hour and a half, some light entertainment. So if you follow us through back to where we had lunch earlier, please do join us for a nice chilled end to the day before we restart tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.
Si ha sido una pregunta, no íbamos a invitar a la recepción por preguntar tan tarde. If he has a question, I will propose not to invite him to the reception.